So until this point, we've been exploring timbre by looking at the sound spectrum and comparing different instruments, how their timbres can be seen and heard, the differences in their timbre between instruments. We then went back and looked at a history of instrument development and then talked about the categories of instruments, how all stringed instruments share something in common, all aerophones, etc. Now we're going to be zooming in on the timbral possibilities of any one instrument. I've chosen guitar. It's very common and it's one of the ones I play the most. So our goal is to talk about what are the ways we can vary timbre as the result of instrumental techniques. First thing we're going to talk about is how we attack the strings. So all the different ways that we can use the, let's call it the right hand if you play traditional style, to attack the string. I read in a book once a famous quote by some fiddle player that said that the left hand makes the notes and the right hand makes the music. So by the music, they mean the expression, the how we pluck, and all the different dynamics and styles that we put into the instrument. So let's start with that. So probably the most common way to play this instrument is using the most common thing in the world that I can never find, and that is a regular flat pick. Okay, I found one. You know these things, a flat pick. So we have the choice of what we might call an implement, or the way that we actuate the strings, which means to pluck them. So we could call this the choice of plectrum or instrument, implement. And then within that, we're going to have all the different ways that we can pluck the strings with that implement. So a good example would be if I pluck lightly up here toward the neck. It sounds different than if I pluck way down here by the bridge. Even if I'm plucking or using some other type of implement to actuate the strings, that location on the strings is one of the technique elements that will vary the timbre and is very noticeable. The other go-to way that I personally play this instrument, which is finger style. So we're plucking with the fingers. So you might ask yourself for a moment, why does it sound different when I do the same stuff using, for example, the flesh of my thumb? So why does it sound different? Well, because I'm strumming it with something different, but why does that make a different sound? Specifically, it has to do with the hardness, pointedness, and material that I'm strumming with. So let's imagine that I had something the same shape, but it was, let's say, felt. Obviously, the felt is just much softer, so it doesn't strike them as hard. And then the other thing about some of these is that if they're less hard, so if the density, like my finger, is soft, so when it hits the strings, it sort of dampens down some of the more high harmonic vibrations so that it makes it kind of more dull sounding in a nice way. It's more relaxed. Okay, so with the finger style, then I have the option to pluck in very lightly. Or kind of more aggressively and upward, what in bowed string music we call a Bartok pits, where I snap up. The string snaps back down onto the fretboard. I can still change where I'm strumming as well, where I'm plucking, and that matters. Okay, now something else that would fall under an instrumental technique would be playing natural harmonics, like I brought up in our earlier lesson about timbre and partials. If I'm to lightly touch at a harmonic node, so for example halfway up the neck of the instrument, which in this case is at the 12th fret, and for the guitarists out there, you would place your finger right directly above the actual fret itself, not in the gap between the frets where you normally play. Let's hear the difference in sound between a regular stopped note and the same note played as a harmonic. So it can be kind of subtle, but there is a difference there. couple other normal style guitar things would be playing with finger picks. So this puts us in between flat picking and finger style. Now we have the plucky intensity of the actual picks. In this case, they're metal. You see this a lot in banjo playing. So it's going to be plucky and harsh, but we also have the control and variety of plucking that we did with the fingers. So so you get that kind of clinky plunkiness, which I really like. Okay, and then sometimes going along with that, we could do our first left hand thing that I'm going to show. So most of all of this was with the right hand. Again, I'm on standard guitar where you strum and pick with your right hand and fret with your left hand. This is a slide. So there are metal and glass slides. Originally, the legend has it, they were broken ends of beer bottles. And here's what it sounds like if I play the left hand with a slide. Kind of a familiar sound from bluegrass and swampy rock and country. What if I try to stay right in the same spot and play the same note, a regular note, and my point here is even if I don't slide around, it does have a different timbre, a different sound. And then, of course, there's all these notes in between that I can get to now with this. Okay, so that's a slide. But a couple last little ways that we can play with the timbre here, some well-known fun kind of things. Wonder if this still works. This is an E-bow, an electronic bow. What it tries to do is make a little, feedback loop. Here we go. So it can sustain sort of infinitely. Whoops. Okay, and then the last thing I wanted to show is actual bowing with a bow from, let's say, a bass. It makes a nice different timbre. Doesn't sound like a regular guitar, and it doesn't sound just like a cello. This is called a passerelle bridge. You could stick this under here and get a very different sound. So what this does is it raises up the strings so you can play it kind of like a harp. So I hope you had fun with this, and next time we'll be getting into the complete opposite, maybe you might say, of playing techniques on an acoustic instrument, and that is synthesis. So to close out our timbre module, we've got one big mountain left to climb, and that is what happens with timbre when you use synthesizers and make the sound from scratch. And then the last lesson after that will be all of the effects, like distortion and reverb. All right, I'll see you next time.